And hello, how are you today? Thank you for joining me here at Welcome Road Baptist Church and the fundamentals of Christianity. I'd like to talk about um, a wilderness, dark times, hardships, problems, days in our lives when things feel a bit dry, things are a little dark. Um, when we go through these types of issues, confusion, um, not sure where to go, not sure what is happening. We want to look at Psalm number 63 today. Psalm number 63. Now, this will be a three-part series, and today I would like to look at the word in the wilderness, a word in the wilderness. Here in Psalm number 63, David is in a wilderness. We're going to see the very first verse, Psalm 63:1, within the title of this psalm. We know that David is in a wilderness. We know that David at this time is the king, and he is running from his son Absalom. Now, there's several reasons why we may find ourselves in a wilderness, in a place of darkness, uh, a place of solitude. The wilderness in the Bible often speaks of solitude. We see many people who are in the wilderness. Israel was in the wilderness. Hagar was in the wilderness when she was cast out by Abraham. And of course, God helped her. Christ was in the wilderness 40 days and 40 nights, tempted of the devil. And so the wilderness speaks of great testing. It also speaks of temptation of sin. Christ was not in the wilderness because of sinfulness at all. No, he was in the wilderness through, he was being tested through those things that he suffered, to give us an example. Here in our story of David, David is in the wilderness because of sin. He sinned against the Lord, and now he is running for his life. God told him that the sword would never depart out of his house. And so this is where David is. But even, and this is the great thing about God, that when we sin, there's always going to be suffering for that sin, okay? Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. There's chastisement because of sin. But even in the middle of that chastisement, and even in the middle of God chastening his children, here David reveals, and God reveals, that we can still pursue and have a relationship with God even in the middle of that. And so I would like to look at, there are 5 words, 5 phrases, but 5 words for us in the wilderness. The first word is to pray. Notice that David prays in the wilderness. The Bible says, Psalm 63:1, a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. That's the title that lets us know he's in the wilderness. O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is, to see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. David is crying out. He says, "Oh God, my God." Very similar to the same phrase that we read in Psalm 22, my God, my God. This is a cry of desperation. This is not a cry of doubt. And this is not a cry of, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this is a cry of desperation. He knows what he's going to do. And what is that? He's going to pray. He's going to call out to God. When we are in these places of darkness and of hardship, let that be the first thing that we do, and that is pray and to call upon Christ for help. Secondly, just notice he praises in the wilderness. Now, verses 3 and 4 shows us this about David. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. What a wonderful thing. David begins to pray. Now we see David is praising. Now, why was David able to praise in the wilderness? It was because he had prayed in the wilderness. See, prayer, and we know that praise does this as well, but true prayer, when we're lifting up Christ, when we are magnifying him in his position and in his power, that type of praying will always lead to us praising God. Why? Because when we go to God in prayer, holding Him in the right position that He needs to be, and that is King, and that is Lord, and that is all-powerful, okay, the one that is able to handle all problems, where we make God bigger than our problem, it always will lead to praise, because we understand that God can. Here we see that David praises the Lord. He prays and he praises. But the third thing I would like for you to consider is that he pauses in the wilderness. The third word is he pauses. Now, notice Psalm 63, verses 5 and 6. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches. Now, notice here. Now, he is praising, but he takes it even further and he takes it even deeper. He says, my soul will be satisfied. We'll look at this a little bit later in another lesson. But my soul shall be satisfied. I'll have joy, and then I'll praise you with joyful lips. When will this fullness and when will all of this begin to fully overflood his soul? Listen to what he says. When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches. So what is David doing? David is pausing. David is stopping. David is thinking, meditating, thinking about God. Now notice what he says, when and where he does this. Where he does it is on his bed. When he does it is in the night watches. Now I think it's very fascinating that David says this. Why is that fascinating to me? Because when do our minds seem to run the most? At night when we're getting ready to go to bed. During the day, we're busy. During the day, these thoughts will come into our minds and we'll be concerned about them, but then we go about our daily lives. We're raising our children, or we're going to work, or we're going to school, or we're in the community, whatever it is that you're involved with. Then we go about those things, and these issues, they're in our mind, but we stay so busy, and we allow ourselves really to be distracted by other things so we don't have to think about that. But what does David do? David says at night is when I'm going to pause. Now, why does he say at night he's going to think about the Lord? Because at night is when our minds go crazy. And so what does David do? David says, instead of thinking about the fact that I'm in this wilderness and I'm in this place where I can't handle it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and think about God. I'm going to think about the Lord. I'm going to think about how great He is. I'm going to think about how wonderful He is. I'm going to think about all the good things God has done for me in my life. The next thing, the next word I'd like for you to consider is He pursues in the wilderness. Now, the reason I keep saying this, in the wilderness, is because David's circumstance has not changed. He is in the wilderness. When he wrote this psalm, he was in the wilderness. So he is instructing us, giving us words for the wilderness. Psalm 63, 7 and 8 says this, because thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth hard after thee, thy right hand upholdeth me. Now, what is David saying here? He is saying, in this time of this wilderness journey, or this wilderness that I'm in, I'm going to do something. I'm going to pursue the Lord. Now, we often think that this will be our natural reaction and our natural response. That when there's a problem, we go to the one who can solve it. But how often in our lives is this the last thing that we do? We try to fix all of these situations. We try to fix that, and we try to correct this, and we try to get ourselves out of it. There are certain responsibilities, okay? There are certain things that we are going to have to do depending upon the reasons why we're in this wilderness to begin with. But in the middle of it, what should we do? We should pursue God. Go after Him. There is safety under the shadow of His wing, is what David is saying. And because of that, I'm going to follow hard after God. I'm going to follow Him hard. I'm going to pursue Him. How do we pursue God? We pursue God through the Word of God. We pursue God through prayer. We pursue God through praise. And we pursue God through pausing. all of the things that David is doing here in this psalm to pursue hard after God is to continually to do it over and over again. Many Christians have a hard time grasping this understanding. And that is this, is that when you're in the wilderness, okay, for example, let's say you take a trip, a vacation. You go on a journey, whatever it is, and you get in your car and you're going to drive for 12 hours. Some people can make that 12-hour trip in one day. They will just drive and drive and drive. Some people, it takes 2 days to make that trip. Maybe 3. Maybe somebody says, I only want to drive 4 hours a day. It's going to take them 3 days to get there. Now, this is the point. They begin on Monday, but they don't end until Wednesday. What they started to do on Monday, they have to continue to do until Wednesday, and that's what this wilderness is all about. What you begin, you have to maintain. And that is what David is saying here about pursuing. I'm going to continue to do what it is I was doing. I got victory today. God helped me today. But the same thing happens tomorrow. And so what must I do? I must continue to pursue after God. And then the fifth thing that he does is he prevails in the wilderness. So he prevails in the wilderness. Yes, Psalm 63, 9 through 10. But those that seek my soul to destroy it shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. Now, this is, of course, a psalm that David is writing about. We cannot claim that, okay? We can't claim that. I don't want to claim that. Why? Because the one that wants to pursue my soul is my own sinful nature. I am my own worst enemy. So we can't claim this about, well, my enemies are going to be cast down. The point for you and I, and the principle, is that we will prevail. We'll gain victory in this wilderness. Listen to what he says. But the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory. But the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. And you say, Brother Daniel, what is the point? What's going on here? Well, what I want you to see is that this is a word for our wilderness. A word for those days when we're going through some hardships. 5 principles, 5 words that I want you to pray over, consider. Read Psalm 63, and may the Lord bless you in your walk with Him.